I want to tell you a story about what happens when the people you sacrificed everything for finally show you exactly where you stand. It didn't come with a warning. It came with a phone call. One ordinary Thursday afternoon, my son called to tell me I wasn't welcome at his wedding. By the following Monday, I had done something none of them saw coming. But before I get into all of that, drop your city or country in the comments. I read every single one. I turned 63 the spring my son told me I wasn't needed anymore. Not in those words. He was careful about the words. Theo, we always called him. He got that from his mother's side. The way of saying hard things gently enough that you almost don't notice the blade until you're already bleeding. He called me on a Thursday. I remember because I was sitting on the back porch of my place in Rockford, Illinois, the one I'd bought after the divorce. A small 2-bedroom on Mulberry Court with a yard that backed up to a drainage easement nobody wanted. I'd made it work, put in a garden along the fence, learned to grill on a budget. Thursdays I usually had leftover chili and the game on, nothing dramatic. The phone rang just after 5. "Hey, Dad," he said. I could hear something behind his voice. Not nervousness exactly, more like rehearsal. The way someone sounds when they've been practicing a line long enough that it comes out smooth but hollow. I said, "Hey, back." Asked how he was. He said fine. Said Brianna was fine. Said they were excited about the wedding. I said good. Told him I'd mailed the gift for the engagement party last week. Asked if they'd gotten it. He said yes, thanks. Then the pause. "Dad," he said, "we've been talking, me and Brianna and her family, about the ceremony. About the seating." He stopped. I waited. There's going to be a lot of people there, and we wanted to feel a certain way. Brianna's parents are very traditional, very formal, and with everything that happened between you and Mom, we think it might be easier for everyone if you didn't come. I didn't say anything right away. A robin was pulling a worm out of the garden bed along the fence. It yanked and finally got it free and flew off like it had somewhere important to be. "Dad, you still there?" "I'm here," I said. "I want you to understand," he said. "This isn't about not loving you. It's just about keeping the peace. Mom's going to be there, and you know how she gets, and Brianna's mom is already stressed about everything, and we just think it'll be cleaner, if cleaner," I said. He stopped. "That's a word," I said. "Dad." "It's fine, Theo," I told him. "I hear you." He talked a little more after that. Said maybe we could do dinner after. Said he'd make sure I saw photos. Said he loved me. I told him I loved him too because that was true regardless. We hung up. The robin came back for another pass at the garden. The chili was still on the stove, and I'd lost all interest in it. I sat there until it got dark. I want you to understand something before I go further. This didn't happen in a vacuum. I want to be honest about that. The divorce from Barbara had been ugly. Not violent, not catastrophic, just ugly. The kind of ugly that happens slowly, when two people stop choosing each other and start just existing in the same structure because neither one wants to be the one who leaves. I left. That was my mistake in their eyes. Theo was 22 when I moved out, old enough to understand, young enough to still blame. Barbara had a way of framing things that I won't get into except to say that by the time it was over, I had become the man who abandoned his family. Even though Theo had been grown and out of the house for 2 years before I ever packed a bag, I didn't fight that narrative. That was also my mistake. I thought time would correct it. I thought my actions over the years would speak for themselves. I kept paying. I kept showing up. I co-signed the loan when Theo needed a car. I put $4,200 toward his first month and deposit when he moved to Chicago with Brianna. I fixed his transmission the following winter because he couldn't afford the shop. I didn't ask for any of it back. I didn't keep a ledger. I just kept going because that's what you do for your kids. Cleaner if you didn't come. I went inside. I reheated the chili. I turned the game on and watched it without seeing it. The next morning I called my old friend Lawrence. We'd known each other since before Theo was born, back when I was still doing union electrical work out of Local 364 in Joliet. Lawrence had retired 2 years ahead of me, moved down to Peoria with his wife Denise, and had the kind of slow-talking wisdom that only comes from having been through enough that you stop rushing toward conclusions. I told him what Theo had said. Not all of it, just the shape of it. Lawrence was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I said. "Well," he said, "don't do anything small." I didn't know what that meant at the time. I wrote it down on the notepad by the phone anyway. I had a habit of doing that, writing down things that felt like they mattered before I understood why. That weekend, I drove to the storage unit off Route 173, where I kept the files I'd moved out of the house during the divorce. 2 metal cabinets, beige, older than Theo. I paid $18 a month to keep them there and had never once regretted it. My ex-wife's attorney had made a point of telling me the records weren't significant. She'd been wrong before. I pulled out the folders one by one. The cosign paperwork for the car loan, the wire transfer receipts from when I'd sent money to Chicago. The Venmo transaction records I'd printed specifically because something told me to. The invoice from the transmission shop where I'd put it on my card, and Theo had said he'd pay me back when he got his bonus. That bonus came and went. I'd let it go. I also found something I hadn't gone looking for. A set of emails I'd printed months ago when Theo had accidentally copied me on a thread meant for his mother. I'd never brought it up. I'd filed it and tried to forget it. Standing under the fluorescent hum of that storage unit, I read it again. Barbara telling Theo that if he invited me to the wedding, her whole side of the family might not come. Theo writing back, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll handle it." Handle it. I closed the cabinet, relocked it, and drove home. I want to be clear. I wasn't angry exactly. Anger feels hot. What I had was colder than that. It was the feeling of finally seeing a room clearly after years of being told the lights worked fine. Monday morning, I called the bank. I'd been with Midwest Community Credit Union for 11 years. Same branch on East State Street, same teller named Gloria, who always remembered I took my coffee black, and once slid me a little packet of Instant from behind the counter when I came in looking rough after a root canal. Gloria wasn't there that morning, but the young man who helped me was efficient and uncurious, and that suited me fine. "I need to look at my accounts," I said. "Everything. Checking, savings, any automatic payments." He pulled it all up without comment. I went through it methodically. The car payment I was still making on Theo's behalf because I'd co-signed and he'd missed 2 payments the previous fall and I'd covered them rather than take the credit hit. $164 a month. Had been for 19 months. I asked to have my name removed from the co-sign. He explained the process. I listened. I said, "Let's start today." That afternoon I called a financial advisor I'd been referred to by a coworker before I retired. Her name was Paulette, 50s, no nonsense, out of an office on North Main in Rockford. We'd met once before and I'd liked her directness. I told her I wanted to restructure a few things. She didn't ask why. She just asked where I wanted to start. I had a savings account I'd been building quietly for 3 years. Not secret, just private. Money I'd been putting aside for a reason I couldn't name yet. The way you sometimes do things because some part of you knows before the rest of you catches up. I'd also been contributing to a small investment account through my pension provider. Both of those, I told her, I wanted to move into my name only, with a beneficiary designation that didn't include anyone currently on them. She nodded, made notes, didn't blink. "We can do that," she said. "Who do you want listed?" I thought about my sister Adele in Flagstaff. We'd grown close again after the divorce. I hadn't seen her in person in almost 2 years, but we talked every Sunday and she was the only person in my family who'd asked how I was doing and actually waited for the answer. "My sister," I said. "Adele." Paulette wrote it down. That evening I called Theo. I kept my voice even. I told him I understood his decision about the wedding. I told him I wasn't going to make it complicated. I told him I hoped it was a beautiful day. I meant all of it. Then I told him, quietly and without drama, that some of the arrangements I'd been maintaining were going to be changing. He was quiet for a moment. "What does that mean?" "The car loan," I said. "I'm removing myself from the cosign. You'll need to refinance or pay it off. You have 60 days. Dad, I'm also not going to be covering the shortfall payments anymore," I said. "That's been automatic and I should have addressed it sooner." His voice shifted. He asked if I was serious. I said yes. He said this felt like punishment. I told him it wasn't. I told him the arrangement had made sense when I was included in his life. It made less sense now. He said he needed to talk to Brianna. I said, of course. I said goodnight and I meant that too. 2 weeks later, Barbara called. I hadn't spoken to her in almost a year. Her voice had that particular compression in it that I recognized from 18 years of marriage. The sound she made when she'd been sitting with something long enough that she'd convinced herself she had the moral high ground. She said Theo told her what I'd done. She said she thought it was cruel. She said I was punishing him for making a hard decision. I let her talk. She had a lot of it stored up. When she stopped, I said one sentence. "Barbara, I've been supporting a family I'm not allowed to be part of." That didn't make sense to me anymore. She started again. I waited until she was done. Then I said I had to go and I hung up. Not angrily. I just hung up. The wedding happened on a Saturday in October. I know because Adele texted me a photo she'd found on someone's public social media. Theo and Brianna on the steps of a venue in the northern suburbs. He looked happy. She looked beautiful. Barbara stood to his left in a blue dress, beaming. There was no space where I might have stood. I didn't spend that Saturday feeling sorry for myself. I drove down to Peoria and had lunch with Lawrence and Denise. Lawrence made his smoked ribs. Denise put on a movie none of us paid attention to. We sat on their porch in the October chill with blankets over our knees and talked about nothing important, and I was grateful for every second of it. On the way home, I stopped at a gas station in Chillicothe and sat in the parking lot for a while. Not because I was lost, I just wasn't ready to be home yet. The highway rolled past in the dark. People going somewhere, not thinking about me at all. That felt right, somehow. Being invisible is only a problem if you're trying to be seen. I got home around 10, made toast, read until midnight, slept better than I had in months. Theo called me 3 days later. He started carefully, which meant he'd prepared again. "Dad, I want you to know the wedding was beautiful." "I'm glad," I said. He paused. He said he'd been thinking, said he wanted to be honest with me. Said the car situation was harder than he expected, that the refinancing wasn't going through as fast as the bank had said. I told him I understood, but that wasn't going to change my position. He was quiet. Then he said, "Did you really mean it? At the time? That you weren't doing it as punishment?" "Yes," I said. "Then why?" he asked. I thought about it for a moment. Then I said, "Because I finally understood the difference between being generous and being useful. You didn't want me there, Theo, but you still wanted my name on the loan. That's not a relationship. That's an arrangement. I deserve something better than an arrangement." He didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, he said, "I should have pushed back harder. On Mom. On Brianna's family." "I know," I said. "I should have told them you were coming regardless." "I know that too," I said. He asked if it was too late to fix things. I told him it wasn't, but fixing meant something different than going back. There was no going back. I wasn't interested in being reinstated into the old version of things. I wanted something new. Something where I existed as a person, not a resource. He said he didn't know how to do that. I told him nobody does at first. We'd figure it out, slowly, if he was serious. He said he was serious. We talked for another 20 minutes. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was more like a beginning of a negotiation toward one, which is more honest and probably more durable. I didn't hear from Barbara again for a while. When I did, it was brief and practical. She'd found a piece of mail from the credit union addressed to me at her house. I hadn't opened it, just wanted to know where to forward it. I gave her the Mulberry Court address, and that was that. No drama, No score settling. The silence between us had become, finally, neutral. Not cold exactly, just a temperature of nothing in particular. I started stopping by Lawrence's place more often after that. Not every week, but enough. There's something about being around people who knew you before the version of you that took all the damage. They don't treat you like something that needs fixing. One evening in November, I was sitting with Lawrence at his kitchen table. Denise had gone to bed. The heat was on, and it ticked and settled in the pipes the way old houses do. Lawrence was working on a crossword. I was looking at nothing in particular. He said, without looking up, "You look different than you did in the summer." "Different how?" I asked. "Like you got your feet back under you," he said. I thought about that. I thought about the car loan paperwork, the beneficiary forms, the storage unit under the fluorescent lights, the phone call with Theo where I'd said the thing I'd needed to say for a long time. "I think I stopped waiting for something," I said. "What were you waiting for?" "Permission," I said, "to take up my own space." He nodded like he already knew, went back to his crossword. Theo and I met for coffee in January at a diner in Joliet. Neutral territory. He looked tired in the way people look when they've been doing a lot of thinking they're not used to. He'd gotten the car refinanced. He'd talked to Brianna. He said she'd been surprised that I hadn't made more of a scene. He said that surprised him too. I told him I'd had practice sitting with hard things quietly. He asked what I meant. I told him 14 years of being the one who kept it together while everyone else had feelings. You get good at finding the calm in it. He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. He said, "I told myself that not inviting you was about keeping the peace. But I think I was also scared. Scared that if you came, Mom would make it about the divorce and not about us. And I didn't want to have to manage that on my wedding day." "I hear that," I said, "but I took the easy way," he said. "And the easy way wasn't fair to you." "No," I agreed, "it wasn't." He said he was sorry. He said it plainly, not dressed up in qualifications. Just, "I'm sorry, Dad. I should have told them you were coming." Full stop. I accepted it. Not because everything was resolved. Because it was real and it was a start, and those things matter. He asked if I'd come to dinner sometime. Something small, him and Brianna and me. I said yes. He said Brianna wanted to meet me properly. He said she'd told him, after everything came out, that she wished she'd spoken up earlier. I told him I'd give her a chance to make up for that, same as I was giving him one. He almost smiled. He said I sounded different. I said I felt different. He said good. He paid for the coffee. I let him. The winter in Rockford came down hard that year. Ice on the drainage easement behind the yard, the garden gone gray and dormant. I put up plastic on the back windows the way my father taught me, stretching it tight over the frames and running a hairdryer along the edges until it shrunk clear. Small things. Practical things. Things that work if you do them right. I talked to Adele on Sundays like always. She asked about Theo. I told her we were taking it slow. She said slow is fine, slow is honest, fast is usually just impatience dressed up as progress. I thought about that for a long time afterward. Some mornings I still drove past the house on Elmwood where Theo grew up. Not out of sentiment exactly, just because it was on the way to the hardware store, and I didn't feel the need to go out of my way to avoid things anymore. The new people had painted the shutters dark green, put in a new mailbox. It looked good, different, like it had moved on in the same way the best things do. I didn't run into Barbara. The city was big enough that it didn't require effort on either side. Spring came. Theo and Brianna had me over for dinner on a Friday in March. The apartment was small and warm, and she'd made a chicken dish with some kind of lemon sauce that I told her honestly was one of the better things I'd eaten in a long time. She laughed and said it was her grandmother's recipe, and I said I believed it. We talked about work and about the neighborhood and about a trip they were thinking about taking in the fall. It wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't the way it used to be. It was something newer, more careful, like furniture rearranged in a room you've known a long time. You bump into the edges at first. Then you learn the new layout. On the way home, I drove along the Rock River. The ice was gone. The water was moving fast the way it does in early spring when everything is releasing all at once. I pulled over for a few minutes and watched it, not for any particular reason, just because it was there and it was moving and I didn't feel like rushing past it. I thought about my son, about the 14 years of payments and signatures and phone calls I never made a production of. I thought about the wedding I hadn't attended, and the way I'd sat on the porch alone on that Saturday in October, and the drive to Peoria and Lawrence's ribs, and the blanket over my knees in the cold. I thought about what I'd learn, not in a sudden way, but in the slow way that things become clear when you stop fighting to make them otherwise. I used to think that being needed was the same thing as being loved. I spent a long time making myself indispensable, because I believed if I was useful enough, the love would follow, or stay. I'm still working out which one it was, but I know now that they aren't the same thing. You can be someone's safety net and never once be someone they consider. You can fund a life and still be omitted from the guest list. What I did when the invitation didn't come was not revenge. I want to be clear about that. I didn't remove my name from that loan to punish Theo. I did it because I finally understood that I'd been carrying a share of his life that he hadn't offered me a seat in, and that was a trade I was no longer willing to make. If you've ever been the one who kept showing up, who signed the papers and covered the gaps and told yourself it was just what you do for family, I want you to hear something. Loyalty is worth something. What you've given is real, but so is what it cost you, and you were allowed to decide, quietly and without apology, that the cost has gotten too high. You don't have to make a scene. You don't have to burn anything down. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop paying into a life that keeps the door locked against you. Stop shrinking yourself to keep the peace. Stop treating your own space like something you need to earn. I'm 63 years old. I garden on Mulberry Court. I drive down to Peoria when Lawrence has ribs. I'm figuring out, slowly, what it means to be a father and a man and a person in my own right, not defined by what I've funded or what I've been omitted from. That's not a happy ending. It's something better than that. It's just the truth. Thank you for being here. I read every comment. Share your city. Share your story. And if this meant something to you, pass it along to someone who needs to hear it. I've had a long time to think about how I got here. Not the logistics of it, the bank visit, the phone calls, the paperwork. Those parts were straightforward once I made up my mind. What I've been turning over, slowly, in the quiet of a house that's finally just mine, is why it took me so long to see what had been in front of me the whole time. I think it comes down to this. When you love someone, you tell yourself the giving is its own reward. And maybe it is for a while, but at some point, the giving becomes invisible to the person receiving it. And when something is invisible long enough, they stop believing it costs anything at all. That's where I was with Theo. Not because he was a bad person. He isn't. But because I made it too easy. I removed the friction from his life so consistently that he forgot there was friction to remove. The phone call about the wedding didn't break anything. What it did was clarify something that had already been broken for years. That's the thing about moments like that one. They don't cause the damage. They just turn the lights on so you can finally see the room clearly. When I removed my name from the loan, when I sat with Paulette and changed who would receive what I'd spent decades building, I wasn't punishing Theo. I was correcting an imbalance I had created by my own choices. I had built an arrangement and called it a relationship that was on me as much as it was on him. You can't give without boundaries for 14 years and then be surprised when the other person forgets the boundaries exist. What I know now, at 63, sitting in a house I chose and a life I've started to rebuild with intention, is that integrity isn't just about telling the truth to other people. It's about telling the truth to yourself, about what you're willing to accept. about where your generosity ends and your self-erasure begins. I crossed that line a long time ago and kept walking like I hadn't noticed. Lawrence told me not to do anything small. I didn't understand that when he said it. I do now. He didn't mean do something dramatic or destructive. He meant whatever you decide, make it match the size of what happened to you. Don't shrink your response to protect someone else's comfort. I had spent years making myself smaller in that family. The smallest possible version of small would have been to let it go, say nothing, and keep signing. I chose different, and Theo, to his credit, eventually chose different too. That coffee in January, the dinner with Brianna, the slow and careful work of figuring out who we are to each other now. None of that would have been possible if I had kept accepting the old terms. Sometimes the most honest thing you can do for a relationship is refuse to continue it on terms that demean you. That's not cruelty. That's the only path back to something real. I still drive past the house on Elmwood sometimes. The new shutters are dark green. I don't feel much when I see it anymore. Just the quiet satisfaction of a chapter that closed the way it needed to.